Your memo and release yesterday on Jeffrey Epstein,
Yes.
It left some lingering mysteries. One of the biggest ones is whether he ever worked for a American or foreign intelligence agency. The former labor secretary, who was Miami U.S. Attorney Alex Acosta, he allegedly said that he did work for an intelligence agency. So could you resolve whether or not he did? And also, could you say why there was a minute missing from the jailhouse tape on the night of the step?
Yeah, sure. If
Hey, Pam, could I just interrupt for 1 second? Are you still talking about Jeffrey Epstein? This guy's been talked about for years. You're asking, we have Texas, we have this, we have all of the things. And are people still talking about this guy, this creep? That is unbelievable. Do you want to waste the time, and do you feel like answering?
I don't mind answering.
I mean, I can't believe you're asking a question on Epstein at a time like this, where we're having some of the greatest success and also tragedy with what happened in Texas. It just seems like a desecration, but you go ahead.
Sure. First, to back up on that, in February, I did an interview on Fox, and it's been getting a lot of attention because I said, I was asked a question about the client list, and my response was, it's sitting on my desk to be reviewed, meaning the file along with the JFK, MLK files as well. That's what I meant by that. Also, to the tens of thousands of video, they turned out to be child porn downloaded by that disgusting Jeffrey Epstein. Child is what they were. Never going to be released, never going to see the light of day. To him being an agent, I have no knowledge about that. We can get back to you on that. And the minute missing from the video, we released the video showing definitively, the video was not conclusive, but the evidence prior to it was showing he committed suicide. And what was on that, there was a minute that was off the counter. And what we learned from Bureau of Prisons was every night, they redo that video. It's old, from like 1999. So every night the video is reset, and every night should have the same minute missing. So we're looking for that video to release that as well, showing that a minute is missing every night. And that's it on Epstein.
Okay, we are now through the looking glass, and we are in Wonderland, and it is getting curiouser and curiouser. Today, Donald Trump's FBI and Department of Justice ended the Epstein investigation. They said there was no blackmail, there were no clients, there's no client list. Epstein definitely took his own life, and it's over, that's it. The most important, perhaps, things to know at all before we get started, and have this in mind as I talk about all this other stuff. The prosecutor, when Epstein got caught back in 07 or whatever, 03, 07, with the soliciting of minors down there in Palm Beach, was named Acosta. Acosta said he gave Epstein a sweetheart deal because he was told from someone higher up that Epstein was part of quote-unquote intelligence. Acosta said this is on the record. Acosta, a prosecutor, went on to later be appointed Secretary of Labor under Donald Trump. Prosecutor to Secretary of Labor. He gave Epstein a sweetheart probation work release deal because he was told he was part of intelligence. When Pam Biondi, Trump's Department of Justice, head of the Department of Justice, Attorney General, was asked about all the videos that they seized from Epstein's residences, she said, "Oh, just child." I had to bleep that. She said, "Oh, it's just CHILD P-graphy. That's all. 100% of it. There's no videotaping of anybody." Now, mind you, there's so many things to get into this. Ghislaine Maxwell is currently serving 20 years for grooming women who said that they were used with many different men. So, of course, there's a client list. And look at this strange exchange. That was today. That was Trump acting like, "What are you guys asking about Epstein for? That's all over with. Remember, Trump is a guy that went on the Lex Friedman show and many other things and talked about looking into Epstein. And of course, on the right-hand side of this, you're seeing playing in a loop Donald Trump laughing and giggling, or as they called it in the hood, kikiing with Mr. Jeffrey Epstein himself back maybe in the early 90s or something like that. At some event, he once referred to Epstein as a, what did he say? He's into young women. There's nothing wrong with that. A very smart guy. I mean, this was before the scandal. So what could be going on here, right? So Donald Trump, in the course of him winning himself election, has, like everybody, has referenced the Epstein case. And just so many places to start. So let me start from an angle of my own. So I was familiar with Jeffrey Epstein sort of for a very long time, from the very first when he entered into the public radar. Was an article, I think it was either in New Yorker or Vanity Fair, because of my father. My father likes to read books, likes to read his little pop science books, and he was part of this, he would read stuff on this website called edge.org, and that was started by John Brockman. John Brockman was a book publisher, and he published a lot of books of scientists who wrote pop culture kind of science books starting in the late 80s, which right when that was starting to be popular, many of the people that were in Epstein's orbit as far as scientists, and Epstein backed John Brockman. Now, edge.org was very interesting. It would have articles about what's going on in physics and neurobiology, and it was all just science stuff. So Epstein was backing Brockman, which led to the edge.org website. So that's why I was familiar with some of those people. So when the first article ever appeared in the national media about Epstein in maybe like the mid-90s, where he was presented as this mysterious, brilliant financier who had a private island and sort of a staff of young, beautiful women, and all he did was he did yoga on the beach and made money on the stock market, and he was just genius. I remember reading it. I was, probably 20 or something, and a smart guy, but very young, obviously unsophisticated. And even for me, it seemed kind of like, just seemed like a propaganda story. But I figured at that age, people maybe paid reporters to write flattering stories about him, right? Because it made him just sound like this magical genius who plus was this cool guy who would have parties where all these scientists would come to. Now, fast forward to what's going on now, and you can backtrack. There's been several over the years. Let's look at where Epstein, as I don't want to get into too much. I'm reading a couple books now called One Nation Under Blackmail that's sort of about Epstein, and they're really just like an avalanche of names. And from having researched things myself, I know that when you're talking about rich people, famous people, politicians, well, by their nature, they're interacting with a hell of a lot of people. So having lists of names of who Epstein once talked to or was on a plane with, it doesn't mean a lot. So I want to kind of let's stick to things that are more concrete. And so there's, like I said, I read an article about Epstein in a major publication just about him being a brilliant financier with strange, well, this was at the beginning of when computers were really being used in investing. So it was an article about him using computers to make predictions and stuff. And then, but over the years, there's been various articles written about him in different publications. And I think those are good snapshots in time of what was going on with Epstein. And let's see if we can make any sense of those. So a guy named J. Epstein who's not related to him, just coincidence. He did an article about him in '87, and Epstein was bragging. Epstein starts out by saying, "I'm a bounty hunter. I recover money that very rich people have had swindled or stolen or come up missing," right? And he was one client he probably had was someone associated with the Spanish royal family, and I think a bunch of money came up missing in something called the Drysdale Corporation. And Epstein would say that he's such a brilliant mind with tax law and investment structuring. On the one side, he could probably help you avoid taxes. He also knows how to figure out with someone else how they moved around your money, and he would recover it for a share of the fee. So he's describing himself like that, and to the reporter, Jay Epstein, he makes the offer, hey, if you're ever flying, or no, the reporter says, well, okay, thanks for the interview, I gotta fly somewhere tomorrow, somewhere far. And Epstein's like, well, drop your tickets off. If you're flying coach, drop them off to my assistant, and I'll upgrade them to first class for you. And in fact, he does. And over several trips, this reporter, just like Epstein's just on some friendly stuff, upgrades his tickets. He puts like a first class sticker on his ticket. But about the third or fourth time he does it, the airline is like, oh no, this is no good. And he ends up talking to one of the different, and also during this time, this reporter is staying in different homes that Epstein has around the U.S., expensive houses. So this is '87, and Epstein is starting to have stuff. But he's also giving out faulty first-class airline vouchers. Weird. Like, you have multiple $1-million residences, which you have the key to, and you're letting people use. You're not lying, but you're giving fake airline vouchers. Are you rich, or are you around rich people, and maybe you have the key to their house and they let you kind of house sit? Because if you're not lucky enough to be in the world of real rich people, or even like I got friends that have like a couple $1 million house, and when they go out of town, they have one of their workers. I mean, I could do it if I wanted, but I don't ask them to. You know, when you have a house that big, you want someone to stay in the house. And there's people, like if you're the child of like really wealthy people, you can live your life just borrowing your parents' friends. You know, they're not using the winter home, you go there. They're not using the house on Cape Cod, you go there. But anyways, so did Epstein own anything in '87, or was he using other people's stuff? Because why is he giving out these fraudulent first-class passes? Now, maybe now here we go to another part of the mystery. Maybe they weren't fraudulent, they just kind of wore out, because Epstein was involved, believe it or not, sort of in a hostile takeover of Pan American Airlines. Pan American Airlines used to be, it's probably the biggest airline in the world back in the, I think in the TV show Mad Men, they do some stuff for Pan Am. Eventually went out of business, but in the late 80s, right around that time, 86, 87, he had gotten involved with this guy Hoffenberg, who had started a company called Tower Investments in Manhattan, and they were set up to collect bad debts. This was like an early debt collection. You know, the companies that call you, Mr. Johansson, would you like to settle for, 20 you owe, Discover credit card. So they had set that kind of company up, but then they were using it to bring in money and try to do leveraged buyouts. This was that leveraged buyout era, if you remember the movie Wall Street. So what's a leveraged buyout? I identify a company that's maybe having financial problems, a large company. It's failing. I can put together $1 billion in various other investors and in bank loans, and I can do a hostile takeover on the company by buying enough stock to take control on the board, because I've calculated that, well, if I break up your company, right, if I sell off all the real estate you own, maybe you have a couple divisions, you say you manufacture, I don't know, power tools, and your drill division has a good brand name and is profitable, I can sell that off for $300 million. You got some real estate, I can sell that off, and then we can move all the unpaid debt from all of them into one of the subsidiary companies, spin that off from the main one, and just bankrupt that. And now the $1 billion loan I took, I've turned it into, $1.5 billion. I pocket $400 million of it, give $100 million of it to the people that put up the money, and then we leave some subsidiary saddled with $500 million in debt and let it go under. And in the case of like the S&Ls, the savings and loans, they stole $600 billion and the government had to pay it off. But that's another story that Epstein may have been, well, not that he ran that, but that he was tangent to some of the people involved in that. So we're talking really, really big money. So the guy Hoffenberg that Epstein was involved, Hoffenberg says he was giving Epstein $25,000 a month. So Hoffenberg said that he was giving Epstein $25,000 a month on this during this Tower investment times to simply act as a consultant. And this is when this pattern starts of people saying that Epstein is this brilliant guy with the tax code and with numbers, and he can figure out how to do maybe borderline legal or illegal things with the tax code, with investments. Is that true? Is it not true? That's another mystery of Epstein. So anyways, Hoffenberg, he's moving into circles with this Hoffenberg guy. They're involved in taking over Pan Am, but yet Epstein is giving out vouchers that aren't real. And then Hoffenberg gets indicted. Hoffenberg ends up doing about 25 years in prison. At the time, was the biggest. Mind you, Epstein was his paid consigliere by both of their admission, and Hoffenberg he just got out maybe 8-10 years ago, and he died a couple years ago. He had a $475 million fraud he ran through this Tower investments. They were just, collecting money and keeping it, spending it on themselves, etc. Much bigger thing than that Wolf of Wall Street, which was very small-time stuff. So Epstein manages to avoid getting indicted in that, even though he was the quote-unquote consigliere. And right after that all goes sideways, this writer bumps back into him, or a couple years after that, and now Epstein owns a lot more stuff that seems to be actually his. And let's jump back in time a little bit again to 1981. Epstein, for maybe less than a year, is on the radar as an actual official member of the America's financial services sector. He's working for Bear Stearns, which is a big mortgage or investment banker, meaning they would buy and sell stocks for people, make investments, help set up leveraged buyouts, all sorts of financial services. I don't know, is Bear Stearns even in business now? They might have been a casualty of the 2008. I'm not sure. I know Goldman Sachs was. I can't remember about Bear Stearns. So, but he got fired from them for some malfeasance, possibly involving some airline tickets he wasn't supposed to be using, which ties into what he was doing with that writer. So is Epstein a guy that whatever situation he was in, he would use it to create an air of deception about himself to make him seem more than he was, so that he could keep so that he could keep cultivating contacts in the media world and the business world? Because if you can do favors for people, Well, you know, that's what life runs on. And that same writer, Jay Epstein, talked about how whenever he would stay at one of what he thought was Epstein's residences, there would always be Morgan Fairchild, who was the woman who played Murphy Brown in that hit TV show that was Epstein's friend. All these women, some of whom were very young and attractive, but some, well, were older attractive women that were college women, that were big-time career women that knew Epstein and didn't have anything bad to say about him at that time. Epstein seemed to have an amazing ability to cultivate other human beings. Now, is that his own skill? Is that the mark of an intelligence operative? Do you get trained to do that? Does that come naturally? Or maybe it comes naturally and you get trained to do that. Because let's take one more jump back, and where does Jeffrey Epstein come onto the radar at all? Well, he was going to college in the mid-70s. He's a Jewish kid from Lafayette Gardens area, which is the border of like Red Hook and Bed-Stuy, where the infamous Damien World Hardy years later would have the Cash Money Brothers crack gang, ironically. But that's where Epstein grew up in the late 60s. By the late 70s, is in college. He does not finish college. He works as a roofer for a period of time, and then he gets hired on the recommendation of Ace Greenberg. Ace Greenberg is the guy that went on to be, Greenspan. Yes, Alan Greenspan, the guy that went on to be the head of the U.S. Treasury. Alan Greenspan is the one who recommended Epstein for his job at the Dalton School, which was a high-end, very expensive private school there in Manhattan. He taught math. He lasted there a year or two. There's so much stuff about Epstein. I'm just giving you kind of a highlight reel, and I'm going to do some more on Epstein because it's pretty fascinating. So there's going to be a series of these. Epstein, of course, there's some people that complained about him going to parties with, these are high school students, with the high school students hanging out, making inappropriate advances to girls, but nothing too bad comes out. He moves on from there. That's when he goes to work for Bear Stearns. He doesn't last long because of some malfeasance, whether it was the airline tickets or something bigger. He then he meets the Hoffenberg guy, leaves him just before Hoffenberg gets a lengthy prison term for a $475 million fraud. Somewhere in this area, he meets Ghislaine Maxwell. Ghislaine Maxwell, the woman who's now serving 20 years for procuring and preparing women for the clients that the Trump administration say doesn't exist. And Ghislaine Maxwell is the daughter of Robert Maxwell. Robert Maxwell, British publishing magnate. He owned, some of you may remember from your school books. You remember Macmillan, Harcourt Brace, or Macmillan? They did a lot of school books. That was owned by the company, one of the publishing companies that Robert Maxwell had. Robert Maxwell thought to be a British and a Israeli intelligence asset. And when you hear people thrown around as being working for, so-and-so was CIA and he was the Mossad, there's very few CIA agents or Mossad agents. Well, there's very few Mossad agents, and there's not that many CIA agents, but they'll use the word asset. That just means any of us could be a CIA asset, right? Al Prophet is going to, whether we trick him into it or he does it for money, he's going to do stories to make the CIA sound like a good place to work so that we can recruit more easily. That would make me a CIA asset, right? There's a lot of things that could make you a CIA asset. You're a pilot that's caught ferrying yayo from South America to LA, and you get caught in the CIA, and some mysterious person comes in and says, well, we can get you out of trouble, but you got to fly some GUNSs down to South America for us. And you never really know that there's the CIA, and they don't tell you, but that's who it is, and that would make you a CIA asset. You're just someone who does stuff for them, or they do something for the Israeli or the KGB or anybody. You're not one of their employees. You may or may not know you work for them. There's a lot of people that are assets at different times, and Ghislaine Maxwell's father considered to be probably an asset for British and Israeli intelligence services. That's a whole big long story. But in a nutshell, in the early 90s, it's come out that he's looted the pension fund of his company. The walls are closing in on him financially. He's known for his lavish parties and, having the royal family at his mansion for his 60th birthday party and all this stuff. And Ghislaine Maxwell grows up in that. She knows all these people. Somehow she meets Jeffrey Epstein. Her father, Robert Maxwell, is out on his yacht. He supposedly, this is when he's under all this pressure. He is feeling ill, but he decides to go take a number one off the bow off the deck, and he falls into the Mediterranean and passes away. There's a lot of self-life taking in these stories, not just with Epstein. So here Maxwell is said to have either died accidentally or on purpose, if you catch my drift. So make note of that. So so he had hundreds of millions of dollars. It's not really known where that went to. Once again, the Hoffenberg, Epstein's partner in that Tower Investments, he stole $475 million. A lot of that wasn't recovered. Ghislaine Maxwell's father's money wasn't recovered. This is around the time when Epstein starts having money. He's having an investment fund. This is when he meets Leslie Wexner, who owned the Limited. He also owned Victoria's Secret. Under his tutelage, or under his control, Victoria's Secret grew to be the business and cultural and influence behemoth that it did. Victoria's Secret was a big deal for a long time, if you don't remember. And there was actually a private detective hired by some of Wexner's business associates, were put on the trail of Jeffrey Epstein to figure out what the hell he was doing with Wexner. And they're the ones who figured out about him having worked as a roofer, and they were telling these journalists not to trust him and all this stuff. So all these points that Epstein is surfacing at, it's hard to get a handle on them. Like, you don't really just pop up with money. Like, oh, I was a teacher, then I was at Bear Stearns, then I was with a guy, and he got indicted, and hundreds of millions are missing, but I didn't get indicted, and then now I'm somewhere else, and now I'm hanging out at certain parties, and oh, my girlfriend's father is a known intelligence operative who's about to go to prison for embezzling $700 million, but he falls off a yacht, and no one knows where his money went to, and suddenly I have an investment firm. And Leslie Wexner, again, the one who owned the Limited and Victoria's Secret, amongst other things, he's treating Epstein like a real business partner. And Epstein's skill, again, is supposed to be able to do esoteric financial maneuvers, perhaps involving the tax code, legal. So I'm going to give you another little outside story, because you can't, you read the stuff and you think clear cut, well, Epstein's definitely shady, but then you think, well, who knows? Like, so here's a story of there's a very rich guy, billionaire named Leon Black. He has a hedge fund. I just read an interview with him. He was complaining. So he's a guy that wrote a check to Epstein at one point for like $178 million or something. That was income, that was money Epstein could account for. Leon Black talks about, now this is what goes on with the real rich people. It makes you not want to even have that type of money. He had some Russian hua that he had put through Harvard. You know, he like paid for her to go to Harvard. She got like a PhD, or she's a dentist or some like really good job. And he had cut her checks here and there for $1 million. Plus, I'm sure he bought her, was paying her rent, buying her fur coats. Leon Black's a billionaire. He says he starts having dinner with her, and she's like, oh, I feel like you took the best years of my life. I want $180 million from you or something. She starts telling Leon Black. Leon Black starts wearing a wire. He approaches the FBI. And he gets her into some trouble. And that's just a side story. But Leon Black says that he hired Jeffrey Epstein, which fits Jeffrey Epstein's story of being this financial wunderkind, to basically, Black had billions of dollars. He wanted to set it up in a way so that he could pass it to his children with the smallest possible tax burden. And Epstein figured out a way to save him hundreds and hundreds of millions. So whatever it was, he said, you know, I'll give you, if you save me $500 million, I'll give you 30% commission, or whatever it was. He gave Epstein like $170 million or something for that, which is, I mean, plausible. Like, the checks exist. A journalist checked into that. There were checks written from Leon Black to him, and it said for financial services. So I don't think Epstein's a fraud. I mean, unless you think Epstein's part of an intelligence service who was making all that stuff happen, like he had a team behind him. Very, very strange. Now, let's fast forward to, so that's just a few kind of background things. And Epstein may have been involved with Adnan Khashoggi and some other. Adnan Khashoggi at one time promoted himself as the world's richest man. He was a big arms dealer. He would set up arms deals between China and Iran and the United States and Saudi Arabia. And he was known, he would call himself the world's greatest whoremonger. He would travel with 100 women. He was like the Sultan of Brunei. And of course, people that keep dozens or hundreds of very, very attractive, not just attractive, but they're getting college girls, they're getting young women with college degrees. These are women that can sit and be with rich men and be interesting and talk and hang out, and there's sex involved, and they can be discreet. And intelligence services and honeypots, which is using sex for putting people into blackmail positions, is something that goes back, well, to the beginning of intelligence, or, you know, really to the beginning of probably human society. So what was Jeffrey Epstein up to? Was he really someone who you could call on to do complex financial services? In his connection possibly with Adnan Khashoggi in the 80s, Adnan Khashoggi, well, when you're selling arms, you're dealing with terrorist groups, drug dealers, countries that are on the outs, Libya. You're doing things borderline illegal. You're deep into the banking system, and you're right in the heart of the tentacles of not just intelligence, because it's not, you don't get caught up in this whole CIA, Mossad thing, because it's bigger than that. It's about, if you know a secret or if you've done a favor for very wealthy and powerful people, they will protect you simply to protect themselves, right? To keep their own name from coming out. And it's so strange the way that Trump and them today, and the Department of Justice and the FBI said there's no client list. Well, then what was Ghislaine Maxwell doing? She specifically was found guilty of procuring women for clients. Prince Andrew paid her a settlement. Wasn't he a client? I mean, he hasn't admitted that. He said he just paid the settlement to make it go away. But also, Jeffrey Epstein, during the Bill Clinton presidency, when was he president? 92 to 2000? White House logs show him visiting 17 times. 17 times. Was he a fundraiser? Maybe. He was dealing with a lot of wealthy people. You'd have to know what that means. We'd have to see all the logs to understand, oh, well, maybe a lot of people who raised a lot of money visited and showed up at the White House a lot of times to try to, throw their weight around from the money we raised. It's, again, hard to know without putting in context. Seems strange when you know what else Epstein was doing, but again, think of if there was a person who lived on your street who was doing stuff with kids, and he was a guy that, just like you, went up to the corner store a couple times a week and got some beer and a frozen dinner and a blunt wrap. If there was records of him going to the corner store 50 times in the last month, would that mean they had something to do with what he was doing in his house with kids? Of course not. So without the context, it's very hard to know. And in a lot of the research, there's all this cascade of names, but rich people, famous people, politicians, they all move amongst each other. So just because they knew each other, they were at the same event once, doesn't mean they're in a conspiracy, though it could. That's why you can't unravel this stuff. So we have to hang on to what we know. And we know that he had clients per the FBI. And now all of a sudden, he doesn't have clients, according to the FBI, the Department of Justice. As far as his self-unaliving, they say the tape looks doctored. I can kind of go both ways on that. I mean, people in going from rich to facing life in prison for that kind of charge, being in the very uncomfortable confines of a prison, a lot of people do take their own life. So that's certainly possible. But it's strange that the footage seems kind of doctored. We may never know. I mean, we're still debating about JFK, though I think most people think there was more to JFK than just Lee Harvey Oswald. What a strange outcome. So just not that long ago, remember when Trump came into office, he said, I'm going to put out all the documents on Epstein, on JFK, on MLK. And a couple months ago, all those right-wing Tucker Carlson and influencers, they got called to the White House and they were given these binders that was supposed to be about the Epstein, and there was really nothing much in it. They haven't released really any new information. And again, like I said in the beginning, they said that all the hundreds and hundreds of hours of video they got from all of Epstein's residences were just CHILDPORN that he was just watching and had downloaded. None of it was anything he had made and had nothing to do with any of these hundreds of women they've made payouts to. And why is Trump talking so weird? And before we get started, let's remember Elon Musk tweeted that Trump won't release the Epstein files because he's in them. And Elon Musk has just started his own political party. Don't forget to subscribe. Let's get our profit to 1 million. Subscribe, subscribe, subscribe. So yeah, Elon Musk tweeted and has now deleted that Trump is in the Epstein files. And then we have this weird video clip where Trump is acting like, well, are you guys talking about this? This is no big deal. Even though Trump himself, I think that the idea that there's no records, Epstein didn't interact with anybody, is totally ridiculous. And they're doing this all right in plain sight. while, I don't know, I think everything is falling apart. There is no morality. Once you guys put Trump into office, just kind of even the pretense that we're living in a civilized, rule-abiding country went away. You guys are getting what you asked for, and I'm very careful. I don't get too much into conspiracy theories. I haven't said too much about Epstein. I did do some stories about his Ghislaine Maxwell's father's ties to intelligence, and certainly something weird's going on. But this idea that there's no clients, there's no video, nothing to see here at all. There's nothing to see here at all. I mean, there's not one person to throw under the bus. The problem is with actual rich and powerful people, you throw one of them under the bus, they're going to make sure the whole bus gets turned over. They're not going to go down lightly. So, believe what your eyes see and believe what your ears hear, but be careful of what others attempt to tell you you saw or heard. We're just getting started unraveling this Epstein thing. They're trying to hide something from us in plain face.